We are back on Morningline. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday. Nick Barris here, along with Professor Thomas Schwartz over at Vanderbilt University, taking your phone calls as we talk about the situation, the latest in Afghanistan and the U.S. pull out there militarily. We've got some more calls, Professor, and next up on the horn is David. David, good morning. Hi, David.
Hey, good morning to you, and good morning to the professor. A lot of people don't realize that most of this stuff goes back to what's called defensive stocks. And basically, once again, if you just follow the numbers, the money trail, you'll find out that former military people have invested with defensive contractors and have made millions. Mm-hmm. Some who are already millionaires have become even more of a millionaire. And it's all traced to investments in stock. Boots that cost money, shoestrings cost money, belts, all these things add up. There's a company called P.4 out of Irving, Texas, that handles just logistics for the military.
Sure.
They made billions of dollars, so that needs to be addressed. Yeah. And also there are people in Congress like Mitch McConnell and his wife, Ms. Cheney, who also have investment in the war over there and have made money as well. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you for your call. Address that a bit, because, I mean, when I keep sitting here saying, well, why was it we stayed in Afghanistan for more than 20 years after taking out bin Laden? I think there are maybe some good reasons, and you pointed out one about, well, we didn't know at the time if we had left with the Taliban takeover. Well, they may have. Of course, now they are again. But, I mean, against this backdrop, and we've seen this before with Iraq and oil, you wonder if there is that industrially military complex and the money that is to be made where it's in someone's best interest lining their pockets, knowing that we have this continuing, never-ending conflict in Afghanistan.
I think, with all due respect to the caller, I think that confuses the effects with the cause. Yes, people make money supplying the military. Yes, people have developed vested interests and then think that this should influence to maintain that. But, you know, even some of the things the caller was talking about, that didn't require us to be in Afghanistan to pay for those interests. The military has bases everywhere. You're still paying for those things. If the idea, of course, that the United States military is a type of world policeman, or at least a type of providing order, at least in part, for this liberal world order, is something that goes back to the post-World War II period and to the idea that the United States needed to play a big role on the world stage, and that would require a large defense budget. Now, yes, some people have profited from that, and they may have also been, of course, outspoken defenders of it. But I don't think that's what drives these particular issues. I think that's a type of conspiracy theory that's all too prevalent in so many ideas in our political world these days.
As far as Afghanistan is concerned, comparing it to countries like perhaps Syria or Iran or Iraq, is oil much of an issue in Afghanistan? Oil?
No.
Okay.
No, there's not.
I didn't think
it's
so.
What is an issue? There are evidently some very valuable minerals in Afghanistan, and that is one reason the Chinese are very active now in trying to court the Taliban government to make some decisions that might involve Chinese companies coming into Afghanistan.
Interesting. I was just wondering about the natural resources, because unlike Afghanistan, we know oil plays a role when there's a U.S. interest in the Middle East. There just is. Oil is a part of that, and it jades some of the decisions, or at least influences them. Let's go next to Ron. Ron, good morning. Hi, Ron. Are you there, Ron?
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead, Ron.
Why don't we just admit we was played for a sucker for 20 years is what it was. And they wasn't fighting for us. They were fighting for the money that they got over there. Biden got through saying he had the best trained army, over 300,000 that we trained over there, and they were the best trained, best supplied army in the world. And we pulled out, and they took over Afghanistan. It goes to show that they didn't want us there to start with. And all those people that's wanting to come over here, every one of them wants to come over here because of the reason that we'll give them a free education, we'll give them a home to live in, we'll feed them, and we got people in our own country starving to death.
What percentage of the population there in Afghanistan, and again, we saw many of them there at the military base trying to hop on that C-130, but I mean, you have the Taliban and you have their followers. What percentage do you think of that populace is sorry to see the U.S. go because they say, oh no, here comes the Taliban?
Well, this is a difficult thing. Yes, obviously the Taliban had support, but there were large numbers of Afghanis, especially in Kabul. What percentage? Who knows? It's significant. It's just not necessarily the best organized or the most developed against in a military fashion. The Taliban had sort of the strength of the fanaticism of their ideals in a way that those who opposed them didn't. I think the caller was pretty callous about thinking that people would hold on to outsides of airplanes just because they wanted to come to the United States for free education or food. That's sad. These people, many of these people invested in American ideals and beliefs and wanted to support, they wanted to stay in Afghanistan, make Afghanistan a better place, especially the women. And now we basically abandoned them.
Yeah, and many of them may now be persecuted for sure, worry about their own safety. They can become political refugees. Let's take Sandra real quick. Sandra, are you there, Sandra?
Yes.
Go ahead, ma'am.
I just kind of wanted to reflect a little bit on history in the past. Did not Russia, a few decades ago, intervene in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
And are there parallels between how Russia dealt with it and how we're dealing with it?
I'm glad you brought that up at least. We only have a couple minutes, though. Go ahead, Professor. It seems like obviously Afghanistan, Russia, the U.S., and somehow you never get headway in Afghanistan. These superpowers end up ultimately leaving.
Well, Russia did leave. Russia went into Afghanistan in 1979, Christmas 1979. They overthrew the government, they assassinated the president and established their own government, tried to impose a communist society on Afghanistan. There was a great deal of resistance, and we helped that resistance. We helped the Mujahideen. We provided arms from Pakistan. We trained fighters. Even Osama bin Laden was part of that resistance, although we didn't directly fund him. But there was a resistance, and it gradually wore down the Soviet military. And as the Soviet Union faced all sorts of economic problems in the late 1980s under Mikhail Gorbachev, they withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989. So yes, there were parallels. The difference is I don't think that we had to withdraw for economic reasons. I think we withdrew for a political and ideological belief, not because our economy was collapsing.
And of course, we were there for a different reason. Can you tell me what was the reason that Russia had any interest in Afghanistan?
There had been a communist government had come into power there in overthrowing the king. And they were defending, this was part of what was called the Brezhnev Doctrine. They were defending the idea that once a communist government comes into power, it could not be overthrown. And they did not, history's progress required that communism remain, and they were not going to allow a communist government to be taken out.
And just as we wrap things up, it is unique. Afghanistan, real quickly, I mean, it's tough to unroot them there. They're in the mountains, they're guerrilla fighting. It's just a very, very difficult country to defeat, is it not?
Of course, and it does have this reputation as the graveyard of empires. The British tried to tame it. It's been in different circumstances throughout history. It's not a unified national state in the way we would think of a unified national state. And it is a very difficult place to govern or rule. And certainly the Taliban will probably discover that as well, although I think this is still going to be very tragic.
Yeah, I agree. Listen, fascinating conversation, great calls. And Professor, as always, I really appreciate your time. I learn something from you every darn time you come on. You're a fine professor. Thank you for coming on. We'll talk to you again sometime soon, my friend.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. Again, Professor Thomas Schwartz over at Vanderbilt. Interesting, because I learned a lot trying to get up to speed. Listen, we'll take a break, have a programming note for you right after this. Stay with us.